Every hello.
Hello.
This is saying it does say that it's live. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I love this like change between. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our last show of September. Just a little side note, I will be taping something with Aisha about when we have family. Oh my God, I'm just drawing a blank. When we have anyways, Aisha's session from last week when I was sick, we're going to be filming it this week. So welcome, Heather, who I hear went to a football game and we did well, did we?
We did. Well, at least we won anyway. So
there you go. I know it's the Argos, so what can you say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's still good ball. So I am back in the land of the living. Isn't that funny with what we do and what we talk about? Maybe not appropriate words, but today we're going to talk about something because we had a huge event this last week in which Queen Elizabeth II died and opened up a whole bunch of different emotions on a whole bunch of different people. And you know, the funny thing is, many of us never met her. I know for me, in my personal opinion of her as a woman, I think that she really displayed feminine power well.
Right.
That she owned. She didn't choose to get into this. And we're not even going to get into that because that's not really the main thing. But the one thing I've always respected about her is she owned her space. She owned her title and she took her responsibility seriously. She didn't, you know, there was rarely a misstep when it came to letting people know who she was and being a part of our life in a way that brought comfort and sometimes not so comfort, but she's on the face of all of our money and she is a part of our lives, whether we like it or not, or whether she came to that by, I mean, she really didn't have a choice either. She was just born into it, right? So she could have, as we've seen with other people in that kind of responsibility, she could have shirked her responsibilities. She could have not really cared and nobody would have stopped her. All that aside, why does that matter? Heather, I never met this woman. Yeah, right. She won all my money, but why should I be so emotionally invested in somebody I never knew?
Well, and that's, I think, what confuses a lot of people, right? And because even if they didn't like her, they feel sad that she's died, right? There's an emotional reaction to her death, even if they weren't somebody that, you know, had any interest at all in what she does. But I think, as you said, it's the fact that, you know, she is a part of our lives, and it's that familiar pattern, it's that familiar process that we're used to, which has now changed. And it's also the fact that one of the things they talk about around celebrity deaths, or, you know, somebody that you kind of idolize but never have met, is that people are like, how can you grieve somebody you don't really know? Right. And it's like, well, the difference is that you did know them, at least in your fashion. You just never met them. Right. So you formed an emotional connection to this person on your side. And part of what we try to do when we're grieving is we're trying to close that emotional unresolved grief. We're trying to create that emotional closure and completion. So that's what people are trying to find a way to complete, right? To make that closure with their feelings around that. So even if what they know about the person, in this case, Queen Elizabeth II, or if it's any celebrity, that when something happens with a celebrity, that you're trying to resolve your emotional connection. And so you may not know that person as they really are, but in some sense, you know them and you've formed an emotional connection, and you've thought about what it would be like to meet them and what you would say to them and what you think of their decisions on certain things and how they've acted in certain times and how they've reacted to certain things. So you have an emotional investment in that person. And even though it's not a personal connection, like with family or friends, there is still an emotional connection that you have. And that's what grief is, right? It's that unresolved emotional connection that we're trying to complete.
Well, and I think the other part of this that, because one of the examples that I think on a Canadian scale is the fact that when we, sometimes if you travel the world or you go and work in other countries like I have, and people go, oh, where are you from? Toronto. And then it's like, oh, my cousin's from Toronto. And you're like, yeah, it's a small city. But more importantly, the funny thing was, people are like, oh, well, where were you raised? Like somehow that dictates what kind of human you are, but that's neither here nor there. But I can remember that it's like, oh, Finch and Bayview, Willowdale. And they're like, oh, so because we have a connection, because we have something that we have in common, it allows us to talk to each other with a little bit more familiarity. And so I think that's the part with the part with the Queen. And I'm going to use the example of Gord Downie. Gord Downie, when it comes to musicians or when it comes to people who their expression in the world influences our life in some way, shape, or form. And so that's easy with musicians, right? But Gord Downie, it gave us as Canadians, as a mass of people, to be able to say, oh man, this hurts. And we can actually talk about our feelings in a public manner.
Sorry, you froze on my end. Sorry, Gwenda. So
it says my internet is unstable.
I lost you. I don't know if we froze in the recording or the live, but you froze on my end. So I missed the last part of what you were saying.
Okay.
When you started to talk about Gord. So.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So I don't know what happened there. So as I was saying with Gord Downie, the interesting part is that it gave us as Canadians, and what the Queen did was give us as global citizens the opportunity to talk about painful emotions in an open forum, right?
Yes.
So it's like, especially with Gord Downie, I mean, that culminated, I think when I look at a good death, that was a good death. He said, what do I want to do? This is what I love to do. And everybody, all of us Canadians, supported that vision and wanted him to be successful. And that allows us as a group, that emotional catharsis almost. Right. And so that's what I think the Queen does too. I mean, I joke all the time that John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the 22nd of November, and I was born on the 23rd because my mother went into labor that night because it was a big shock. So I joke about me being responsible or, some sort of thing. But if you ask people where they were, they know exactly where they were. They know exactly where they were 9/11. They know exactly where they were when John Lennon's death was announced. And that's because these people, first of all, connect with just a huge number of people. And whether they like it or not, that's been part of their life in a substantial way, either through music. Oh my God, everything. Music gives us permission to cry. Actors watching a certain person doing a role that like a Sidney Poitier who passed away last year, right? It's like they allow us to express our emotions in a different way. So that's what I would add to the conversation here.
I agree, and I think for sometimes it's easy for people to see the big ones like that. But I think sometimes people don't understand either personally themselves. They don't understand why they're upset that, why am I upset that so-and-so has died? Or why am I upset that a celebrity marriage has crumbled? Like, why is that important to me? Because it has no direct influence on my life, right? And or why do you get, you're invested in a a character on a show or something, and you know,
Oh,
and I think people don't, they kind of think of to themselves, or they look at other people and they're like, you hear it all the time with soap operas,
yeah.
right? People are like, oh my God, they're upset over the death of this character in a soap opera. Like, and it's like, yeah, but they've been invested in that character for how many years? Like, it's, and so there's an emotional investment. And I think some people look at themselves or look at other people and they just don't understand how that person can be grieving or upset, and they don't allow them to grieve or be upset over that celebrity divorce or over that show that has, you know, closed or you know, gone out of syndication or whatever, right? Like, there's all those kind of things that I think as a society and as an individual, we think, oh my God, that's so stupid, I should not be upset about this. But it's an emotional attachment that we've formed. And you need to allow yourself the space and allow others the space to go through the process of grieving that and moving through it and allowing it to take its place in your life and move through. So,
And then, and exactly, and a lot of what happens in, you know, this, even you can even tie it in deeper, that we're almost told what to care about by the amount of coverage people get. And so
yeah,
that's where we need to be discerning in what goes into our head. But you know, and that, I think that, like, the important thing is to understand, if we can, when we can, any emotional expression when it comes to death is absolutely acceptable.
yeah,
If you pretend it doesn't happen, we often talk about the backpack.
yeah,
We're putting in a little pebble. If we don't talk about that, you know, then us as a collective, you know, then instead you're out for a drink and somebody says something about that person, and all of a sudden you're in this big brouhaha, because it's like, why am I getting so upset that about this? And the other, like, and that also reflects, because it is that backpack. And I remember in my particular loss of health, which was my biggest loss, I could feel things happening, and it's like, why is this getting me upset? So you got to understand that whenever we have an emotional expression, if we don't deal with it and we just put it away because we think, I shouldn't care what Gord Downey does, I didn't listen to Tragically Hip all the time. It's like, I don't really care what the Queen does. Like, you know, personally, it's not, I did watch, I honored the funeral. I watched that, but that's the extent of that. And that's also because if I do feel one way or another, I'm going to, like, you know what I love? I know this sounds really weird, but the end of the year, when they have the in memorial
yeah,
for the year.
yeah,
And that gives me, I literally seek those out on YouTube or whatever, where I can go and I can honor, especially, I love movies. You love movies. We both
yeah,
love movies. I love an actor. I love going to anything that can take me completely out of my head.
yeah,
More importantly, I know there's times where I love those movies that allow me to get totally into my heart. And this is a reason for me to cry, even if I'm not embracing where those tears are coming from in the first place. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that happens a lot, right? So because people feel that they have to have something to cry, right? They're not allowed to just grieve. They're not allowed to just be upset over something. So, you know, they wait until something like that, like an impactful moment in a movie or something like that, and then they let the tears flow, and those tears might be flowing more than what the scene kind of is actually indicating, but it's because you're just letting your body react to all of the grief that has been piling up and letting that release. And that's fine if that's what you need to do. It would be nice if you can just let that release happen in the moment and connected to the things that happen. So,
When
and I
they
think
do.
there's
Yeah.
the other side too is also important, because I've had a few people ask me, it's like, so did you, you know, what'd you think of the funeral? I didn't watch the funeral. I had no desire to watch the funeral. I think the Queen is an amazing lady, and I think her life is astounding. Her life work and everything that she's done. But I didn't need to watch the funeral. I didn't need to do that. But again, it's almost like, but you should have, you should have watched it. You should have done, and you get that from other people. And it's like, no, I did not need to watch that. And it didn't, there was no thing that I needed to watch that for. I will watch bits of it, I'm sure, at some point, just out of interest. But it's like my grieving process for her death was simple, and yes, I was sad, and yes, I grieved and I acknowledged and I went through that, but I didn't need the closure of the funeral.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, again, there are things sometimes when it's such a big death, like a big celebrity death, that people expect that everybody should be doing, X, Y, and Z. And I think it's important to remember that everybody's different, right? Everybody reacts differently, everybody processes differently, and that's okay. However you as an individual need to process or need to go through those feelings, no matter what it is, if it's a celebrity death, if it's a death of a television character, like, or if it's the end of a show, or whatever it is, like,
Oh my God, the Game of Thrones, or what's that other
like,
one? Breaking
yeah,
Bad. I've never seen Breaking Bad. I've never seen Game of Thrones. And I'm okay with that. But I can remember
yeah,
reading books on the subway. One of them was anyways, I remember reading, there was a couple of books where it was like, I would see people on the subway reading the book, and I would go up and with envy and go, oh man, what a great ride that book was.
exactly. Yeah.
And then you put it down, and you're putting down a book. And if people have done well with that story, they've taken you somewhere else. And now it's like, what, I have to go back to my life. So I think, like, just to add to this point, is that that's great when you have like a great book or a great movie where it's like, oh, wow, and your heart feels full. And maybe, hopefully, you've had a good cry at some point. You've laughed, you've cried, you've done whatever. But, more importantly, if you find you with your own user's manual, because nobody else has a user's manual but you, if you find yourself going, wow, I'm crying just a little bit too hard, or
Yes.
I'm reacting in a way, I'm reacting to something that I normally would just barely respond to. Those are keys that are telling you that there's something more, that now's the time you might want to, hey, let's see what this grief recovery method is about. Let's, or and again, the difference is when we hang on to things because we notice something's going wrong, and we notice that maybe we're reacting, and it's like, but what if I'm fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
What if I lose it? What if I start crying and I never stop? Trust me, you will stop. But the more you hang on to that backpack that now weighs a ton, the harder it's going to hit you. And trust me, it'll hit you.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I wholeheartedly agree. As you say, if you're finding you're reacting in ways that are a little off, then it's time to do that deeper dive, right? It's time to take a look at what is it that you're really reacting to? What is it that's really triggering you? And why? Why is it that is still a trigger? What is it that you haven't been able to work through? What is it that you still haven't, that you've tucked away and not just holding on to the backpack, but you've buried it at the bottom of the backpack, and you just don't want to acknowledge it at all. But sometimes you get to that point where you have to do that deeper dive.
And just the movie reference, oh, my little precious, right? My backpack.
Exactly.
It's, and again, oh my God, Lord of the Rings, I love that majesty. But and now here's the other side. Those royal watchers, the ones, it's like, they have the little hats on that they do, and they set up high tea. If you know people that are like that, reach out. So again, I think that just this last little point is about, if we don't give ourselves permission to feel whatever we want to feel. If we don't support our friends when they're feeling whatever they even if they say some things, I can remember, a cousin of mine, both his parents had died within 10 days of each other. And he came up and he said stuff that was a little bit nasty. And I just looked at him and my heart was broken because I knew he was in pain. So that's okay. If it continued, that wouldn't be okay. But it's like, that was the day, and that's heartbreak. So like, if you know those royal watchers, reach out and just say, hey, how you doing? I know that's a big loss. Because I think supporting each other in whatever our emotional expression is, right?
Yes.
Is just so vital.
And even if you feel that you can't reach out to them because you just don't understand why they're grieving in the fashion that they're grieving, at least allow them the space to grieve and not put them down, not stop their process. Allow them, even if you can't understand why they're that emotional, allow them to be that, allow them to have that, and allow them to use their process, because that's what works for them and that's what they need to do.
Exactly. Oh, now I've gone through so many different, like reading good books and all that kind of stuff. I've just gone through because I think that's the important thing is we have an auditory. As an auditory, I remember words to songs. I remember songs, what are your happy songs? So, which is why we go and see old bands, even if they're 70 years old, and like Rod Stewart couldn't even stand up for most of the concert, but he still got that golden voice, right? So, and then I think that's another thing. In tarot, we've got the 6 of hearts, the 6 of cups, it's called. And it's a card of nostalgia. And a lot of times people talk about, what that card represents, and they think it's somebody from the past. It's not so much that. It's the fact that if you're doing any kind of life review or something happens, and we always have these conversations, oh, do you remember when? Well, that's where the Queen comes in. That's where Tragically Hip comes in, because do you remember when we were sitting in that basement and we were listening to Pink Floyd? Oh my God, or whatever it is. The thing about the 6 of cups is you can't live there. You have to be here today. And so do whatever you can to bridge. If there's people, even now, one of the greatest things that I love is being able to, if there's a relationship that matters to me, I like to do my own work on whatever that relationship is, because that keeps my relationship current.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't do it on every single person, but if you know that you've got that favorite musician, like a Chris Cornell situation where, died by suicide, that hits people. Yeah. And then, and that goes into our own insecurities, and that goes in, it sparks all these conversations about the importance of mental health. And then we still back up by only showing our nicest pictures on social media and making sure that we're not, that we're not doing anything, because it doesn't matter out there. It matters in here. So I just want you all to whoever's watching this, to promise to be emotionally honest with yourself. And if you need help with that, there's Heather and we're here to help. And look at me. Okay, we're right. Good. We're just coming up to the 30 minutes. I try not to talk too much, but we could go on forever about that. So any last thoughts on any of these points, or anything that you think we've missed?
No, I think just, be compassionate with yourself and be compassionate with others when they're going through a grieving process that just doesn't seem quite, to make sense. Or even if that doesn't make sense to yourself, of why something has hit you and why, somebody you don't know is causing you to be emotional. Just remember, it's not that you didn't know them, it's just that you never met them.
Oh, I love that.
That comes straight from the book.
Oh, I love that part. Yeah, no, it's not that you didn't know them, it's because
you just never met them.
Exactly. Because isn't that the whole public persona, even though a lot of it is, slicked and polished? I know, we know by the retelling and the kind of movies and things like that. Yes, they're they're entertainized. I know that's not a word, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think the one impression that I always got of Queen Elizabeth, and as a woman at an international leadership role, I don't feel like anything that she said was not what she was willing to say.
Right.
So, and I think that integrity matters to me, like even if you get up, politicians, that's why one of the concerns that I hear these days is, oh, I hate this person. Well, the hate is just as bad as the love, right? Because when we get into something where our emotional connection to something that is not, and as you say, it can be part of our day-to-day life, because that's what we go looking for.
Yeah.
With social media, we start looking for things, all of a sudden more starts popping up. Be mindful of what's feeding your head. Be mindful of what's feeding your heart.
Yeah.
And that's about it for us today. Yay!
Yes.
Great topic though, Heather.
It was.
And if there's any topics that you guys want to see, I'm continuing with my 30 days of live now that I'm back. And one thing that I'm going to be doing this week is with a fellow grief recovery method specialist from the States that I connected with online. And we're talking about International Daughters Day, World Daughters Day.
Nice.
And maybe it's lack of including those children who are no longer on this physical plane.
Yeah.
So, I think the one thing that I want to do out of all of this is I just want to make sure every story is told with the same respect and the same seat at the table. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go. So, and everybody, I hope, again, best wishes. I know there's quite a bit of grief going on out in the East Coast right now. Just had Fiona. I know we're starting to get the rain from that. And we will. So everybody stay dry, stay safe. And I just hope everybody's well and take care of yourself. Right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Love you all.
Bye.
Thanks. Okay, bye.